Show me.
All right, so getting straight into this. The other day, or when I post this, I guess a few weeks ago, Quentin Tarantino, director of such films as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, Hateful Eight, Jackie Brown, all that stuff, was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and they talked a little bit about Bruce Lee, about his representation in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and this is never something I've ever felt the need to talk about. I didn't care for his representation in the film, and then the whole thing of him losing to Brad Pitt's character doesn't really matter because Brad Pitt's character was a fictional character. You can create any character you want and say that they can beat Bruce Lee. I can create any character I want and say that they can beat Mayweather, Ali, Anderson Silva, whoever. Greatest fighter in the world. What's his name? Demetrius Johnson, in my opinion. Greatest fighter in the world. I could create a character and say that my character could beat Demetrius Johnson. It doesn't matter because my character is a work of fiction. However, on the podcast, Tarantino also said a few things about Bruce Lee that I simply don't believe to be true. And I'm not going to come at this as a diehard Bruce Lee fanboy who will defend everything about Bruce Lee, despite this poster behind me, this figure of Bruce Lee right here. I got Bruce Lee movies. I got it all. I'm not coming at it from that perspective. Bruce Lee was flawed. Bruce Lee had problems. There are things that you should not emulate your life that Bruce Lee did. You should not take from Bruce Lee and do everything he did because he was not a perfect person. So I'm going to go through this little clip of Tarantino talking to Joe Rogan about Bruce Lee and just sort of pick out some things that I don't quite agree with, some things that I think he's just, for lack of a better word, talking out of his ass. Let's go ahead and just get started. I'm going to show some clips and then talk about them.
Yeah, a lot of people felt like you made Bruce Lee into an asshole.
Yeah, well, okay, that's okay. I'm a little hesitant to talk about this because I don't want this to be the only thing, all right, that people pull from this show. But I figured you were going to bring it up especially because I've heard you guys go back and forth on it in a little bit. I mean, where I'm coming from is I can understand his daughter having a problem with it. It's her father, all right? I get that. But anybody else, go suck a dick.
So the whole thing of I know a lot of people are upset of him telling people to go suck a dick, whatever. That part, generally, it just doesn't matter. Look, you're going to have people talk shit on anything you make. He's right about saying, I get it, it's her father, she has the right to be upset. She does have that right to be upset. However, everybody else also has their right to be upset, and thanks to the internet, everyone's going to express that. I mean, it's rude of him to say go suck a dick. It's also his right to go say that. I don't think this part's really that important. People comment on my videos saying some stuff. I've seen comments, and I've thought to myself, go suck a dick. But this part really does not matter. He's also about to get into a point about how Cliff tricked Bruce. I really don't want to talk about this part. Again, Cliff's a work of fiction, saying he tricked Bruce. That's how he won. I don't care about this part. I think this part is pretty stupid.
Do you know about the history of Bruce Lee and
Jean LaBelle? Yeah, of course.
Did you research that before?
Yeah, well, I've always known it and everything. Right. And the stuntman hated Bruce.
Really?
On Green Hornet. No, it's in Matthew Polly's book. And before that, it's always been known. That's why Jean LaBelle was brought on, to teach Bruce respect for American stuntmen. Bruce had nothing but disrespect for stuntmen. Really? And he was always hitting them. He was always hitting them with his feet. He was always tagging. It's called tagging. When you hit a stuntman for real. And he was always tagging him with his feet, and he was always tagging him with his fist. And they got to be the point where no, I refuse to work with him.
Really?
And he had nothing but disrespect for American stuntmen.
So this part is where I really think he's starting to talk out of his ass. He brings up Matthew Polly's book. Now, I have read Matthew Polly's book. It does discuss Bruce Lee's behavior while working in American television and with Jean LaBelle. Now, something that I watched a video of Viking Samurai talk about, and I'm just sort of going to say what he said because he's right. I mean, I read the book. I don't know what Tarantino's getting this from. This is not in the book. Jean LaBelle was there. Jean LaBelle was present. However, Jean LaBelle was not brought in to teach Bruce Lee respect. Gene LeBell was brought in because Gene LeBell was a stuntman. Gene LeBell was working. The story from Matthew Polly's book was simply that Bruce would get hyperactive and would... Bruce wanted to impress. Bruce wanted to get himself out there. So even behind the scenes, he would sort of play with people. He would like show how fast he was or how strong he was while they weren't filming. And whenever he would do that to Gene LeBell picked him up. And Gene LeBell was a judo guy. Gene LeBell was a bad mother. And so Gene LeBell picked him up and was just throwing him around, was running with him on his shoulders, and Bruce Lee would scream, "Let me down or I'm going to kill you." And Gene LeBell would say, "Well, then I'm not going to put you down because you're going to kill me." And they would just play. They were friends. They genuinely, like, I mean, they probably had some sort of rivalry there because they're sort of two alpha males. But no, Gene LeBell was not brought in to teach Bruce Lee respect. Gene LeBell was brought in because he was a stuntman working on an action TV show. I don't know if Tarantino is getting some kind of other information because he is Tarantino. He does have connections. He has been on this earth a lot longer than I have. But if we read the same book, I don't know what the Tarantino is talking about there. And for this part of him having no respect for American stuntmen, I don't believe that to be true. I believe that he saw potential as to where American stunts or action in American cinema and television could go. Because at the time they were doing the John Wayne style, the John Wayne punch. And Bruce saw the action and thought it was nothing, thought it was pitiful. He did the exact same thing for Hong Kong action. I've played it in a video before with Raymond Chow. Raymond Chow said that when he was trying to recruit Bruce Lee to come to Golden Harvest and make his initial movies in Hong Kong, Bruce Lee got on the phone and said, "I've seen your recent action movies. Is this the best you can do?" And Raymond Chow told him yes. And Bruce said, "I guarantee you I can do better." Bruce didn't have disrespect, did not lack respect for American stuntmen. He had a lack of respect for American action because he thought it could be taken so much further. And he wanted to prove that. He did not stick to the choreography styles of a lot of these shows at the time. He was on television. You were getting a lot of those Westerns. You were getting Batman. They were wanting him to do Batman-style choreography. And he said, "No, I'm Bruce Lee. I'm doing Kung Fu. I'm going to be fast, I'm going to be powerful, and you are going to see it." Am I saying he didn't hit stuntmen? No, I'm sure he did. I'm sure a lot of stuntmen got tagged. Am I sure that it probably sucked? Yeah. But did Bruce Lee have a lack of respect for stuntmen? No. Bruce Lee loved stuntmen. So many of his friends were karate guys who he was trying to get work as stuntmen. He would call frickin', I don't know, Bill Wallace or Chuck Norris or Bob Wall or somebody and say, "Hey, come to the lot with me. I'm going to get you a job doing stunts on this show." Bruce Lee loved stuntmen, from what I can tell.
Huh. That's interesting. I wonder what that was about. I wonder what his perspective would have been if somebody asked him to explain it.
It's like, they're just not good enough. They're pussies. I want to make it look real.
Okay.
Again, he wasn't doing anything out of a disrespect for the person. He was doing it because he wanted the product to be better. He did not want to produce the quality that was there at the time. He wanted to progress it. If he'd have gone into Shaw Brothers and Run Shaw asked him to do a Chang Che, a Venoms, or a Lau Kar Long style fight scene, Bruce Lee would have told Run Shaw to off. It was not a disrespect for American stuntmen. It was a want and desire to better the product. Was he probably rude about it? I'm sure he was. But it was all for... It was not against any people. It was for the betterment of the product.
Cliff is a hand-to-hand combat killer. He fought in World War II. He fought with the Filipino resistant fighters, in the Philippines against the Japanese. If Cliff fought Bruce Lee at one of Aaron Banks's Madison Square Garden tournaments, Cliff wouldn't stand a chance against Bruce Lee at a Madison Square Garden martial arts tournament. But as a killer who has killed men before in a jungle, he'd kill Bruce Lee. He'd fucking kill him. Bruce Lee's not a killer. Bruce Lee's never really let loose on anybody. He's always had to keep it together in a martial arts tournament kind of way. If he's actually facing a guy who could actually kill him, it's a different story.
So Tarantino feels to have had his wires crossed here, because if there's one thing anybody knows about Bruce Lee, it's that Bruce Lee was a street fighter. Do I think that he got into the most impressive scraps? No. A majority of his street fights he got into, he was much, much younger. The reason he got into Kung Fu was so he could use it in street fights. Bruce Lee did not get into Kung Fu having this huge, amazing respect for the world of martial arts. No, Bruce Lee was getting his ass kicked in the streets, and he was tired of coming home to his parents with a black eye and a bloody nose every day. He was wanting to send other kids home with a black eye and a bloody nose every day. Bruce grew to respect martial arts. However, just as Bruce Lee wanted to do with the action industry, whether it be in America or Hong Kong, Bruce wanted to develop martial arts into what it should be, into something real. And that is why a lot of the traditional practitioners hated him. This is not something that's all fiction that traditional people hated him. Bruce Lee returned to his Wing Chun school where Ip Man was, and a lot of his older Kung Fu brothers felt slighted, felt disrespected, because he took their style and adapted it with other styles to make something that he told them was better. Bruce Lee went to traditional meetings where Kung Fu, karate, and a whole bunch of other people would gather and discuss their styles, and Bruce Lee would get up in front of them and tell them, none of your styles are realistic. None of your styles work, and I'll prove that to you. Bruce Lee would bring somebody on stage, take a good bunch of steps away from them, and say, I'm going to approach you and tap your forehead, and I bet you can't catch me. And most of the time, I think one person ever caught one, but most of the time they didn't. Bruce didn't care about competition. In fact, the only competition that I can remember in Matthew Pauly's book, he hated it because he was trying to do his Wing Chun style. He was still a Wing Chun practitioner at the time, and he had boxing gloves on, and he couldn't accomplish what he wanted with boxing gloves. He was fighting a boxer. He was in college in America, and he hated it. He's like, why do I have to stick to these rules? I know I can beat him without these rules. Let me take these gloves off, and I will demolish him. Bruce Lee did not care about competition. He hardly ever actually competed. Bruce Lee worked with other martial artists to study them. Bruce did not train with Chuck Norris or Bob Wall or any of those karate guys or other kung fu practitioners so that they could absorb from him. He didn't mind that he was also giving them something. He liked that he was giving more of his style to other people to use. But he was a very selfish person in terms of, I'm going to work with you because I'm going to use you to better myself. And there's no problem with that in martial arts. There's no problem with that whatsoever. Chuck Norris was working with Bruce Lee also to better himself. I just don't see this whole thing. And again, fictional character aside, it is, you can make up your own character whatever you want and say my character could be Bruce Lee because I made him. I made him what I want him to be. He is the all-powerful. He can destroy anybody. That's fine. It's your fictional character. That part is a wholly pointless argument. It is moot. But to say that Brad Pitt's character would of course lose to Bruce in a competition is pointless, because Bruce didn't give a fuck about competition. Bruce Lee was not a competitor. Bruce Lee wanted to make something useful and real because he was used to being a street fighter as a kid, and he hated losing, and he thought that's never going to happen again. He wanted to better himself for anything that would ever actually come at him. Bruce Lee did not do high kicks in the street. It's even in Matthew Pauly's book. The leg kick, the low kick is for real, and the high kick is for the movies. He would do things in movies that looked spectacular. His huge haymakers, he loved doing those huge haymakers in movies. He used them several times against Chuck Norris in Way of the Dragon. Bruce Lee would never throw a huge haymaker like that in reality because he did it for camera. It looked cool. It looked neat. He would throw those high kicks in movies because it looked neat. Bruce Lee was all about proficiency. Do I think he was probably the greatest fighter of all time? No, of course not. I think that fighters now these days would probably destroy Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee was at the forefront of helping develop something that was truly about working, about consistency and accuracy. These days, it is finely tuned. They have taken what he started developing and finely tuned it into a working system. I can't say about this whole, if Bruce Lee was to fight Cliff, or whatever his name was, in the jungle, then Cliff would destroy him. Because, again, it's a fictional character, whatever. Do I think Bruce... I mean, I don't know. He's like building this whole purpose of like, if he was to fight him like in the jungle, I'm like, why the jungle? They're not in the jungle. They're in the street. It's a street fight. Do I think Bruce Lee would win? Sure. Does it matter? No, because Cliff is a fictional character. I just think Tarantino is... It's just weird that he's taking this... We know that Bruce was a street fighter and developed Jeet Kune Do for practical purposes, and he's saying that, oh, well, if it was in a competition, of course Bruce would win. Bruce Lee wasn't a competitor. That's my whole point there. Bruce Lee did not give two shits about competing. I just think Tarantino... I don't know. He seems to be full of it and a lot of that. And I love Tarantino. I love his movies. I think he's fantastic. I think he's wonderful. He is a visionary. I'd love to say that I think he knows what he's talking about. He read the same book I did, and I'm sure he's got 1,000 connections that I don't have. But a lot of that does not line up for me. I don't think Bruce Lee was a god. I don't think Bruce Lee was an incredible person. I think Bruce Lee was human. I think Bruce Lee was an asshole to a lot of people, but I don't think it was him being an asshole because he was an asshole. I think that Bruce understood, especially when he got to America, when he got in front of other martial artists or Hollywood industry types, that he knew he needed to be on 110% to win them over, especially if the person he was trying to win over was white, because it was the 60s and he was Chinese. I think that he was an asshole to other martial artists, to kung fu, to karate practitioners, in telling them that their styles were pointless. But at the same time, Bruce Lee was trying to build a business. Bruce Lee was trying to build his school. Bruce Lee needed to get in front of people who had the clientele, who had the students, and maybe win some of those students over, maybe steal some of that clientele, because he was trying to build his business. Bruce Lee was a lot to handle for Hollywood types, for other stuntmen, for producers, for actors, because he knew that in order to win over Steve McQueen, he needed to be just the most live anybody has ever seen. The reason people say, like Coburn would say, God, Bruce was just, he was everything. He was all the energy in the room, and you wanted to be there with him. Bruce Lee knew he needed to be that. And you were going to like him or you weren't going to like him. Because he was a Chinese guy in the 1960s in a racist America, in a racist Hollywood system, when there was yellow face in every TV show and movie. But Bruce knew that if he was going to get in camera, if he was going to get a starring role and not just be the sidekick, he needed to be an asshole to people. Was Bruce perfect? God, no. Was Bruce Lee Bruce Lee? Every single day. That is my thoughts on this whole Tarantino thing. I don't think he was a dick to stuntmen because he hated stuntmen. I think he was just being Bruce Lee trying to better the action industry, whether it be in America or Hong Kong. I guarantee you he tagged just as many American stuntmen as he did Hong Kong stuntmen. Hell, Jackie Chan has even told the story of taking some nunchucks to the head. Other stuntmen, he kicked Bob Wall into like 3 stuntmen and one of them broke their arm. Yeah, he was hitting people because he wanted it to look good. Tony Jaa hit people. I guarantee you Scott Adkins has hit people. Donnie Yen has hit people. It is not a rare occurrence. But what do you think? What do you think of Tarantino's message here. What do you think of my thoughts on this whole Tarantino Bruce Lee thing? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Head over to Facebook, where there is the Martial Arts Film Freak Facebook page, Instagram Martial Arts Film Freak, Tristan_Glover on the Twitter, and I'm doing some pretty cool things on TikTok. I think I'm having some fun over there, talking about my movies, talking about martial arts, trying to stick it as much to martial arts as I can. Martial Arts Film Freak over there on TikTok. Yes, comment your thoughts, like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.